There's a narrative in the Torah. When we come out of Egypt, cross the Red Sea, everything is fine, we're thirsty, we're in the desert, worried about the water. Moses takes us to an oasis. And in the oasis, there's water. There's water, and there's some bushes and trees, all kinds of things. It should be great. We taste the water, and we turn to Moses and say, no, it's bitter. Can't drink it. It's bitter. And so God tells Moses, okay, take one of the branches, throw the branch in the water, it'll be fine. So Moses takes a branch, throws it in the water, everybody goes, tastes it now and says, oh, it's sweet. And of course we're thinking, what did he throw in the water? What was growing that turned all the water sweet when all the water was bitter, this one little branch? What is that? What just happened? And amidst all the commentaries, we get one commentary that says, it wasn't real. Nothing happened. The branch did nothing. Israel watched. It's like a placebo. Israel watched Moses fix the problem. So now they thought the water's sweet. Previously, the water was bitter. The water hasn't changed. What's changed is Israel and their approach to it, and what are they tasting? And this commentary comes in when we're talking about Pesach and Maror, because the question is, why are we eating Maror? What is the bitterness we're supposed to be tasting? And the answer is, of course, slavery. Got it. But then another answer is, go back to those waters, because they're called the bitter waters. It's the same word as Maror. And it's not that it was bitter, it's that the trauma of the experience of Egypt made everything bitter. There was no way they could taste sweet anymore. Life was bitter. Sweet water was bitter. Every joyful experience was bitter. They had no other way to look at things. They had no other way to interpret things. And so God tells Moses, open the door to them that things could be sweet. It's a concept they didn't have. And the bitter waters do that, and Maror does that at Pesach when we taste it. It's not just to say the bitterness of slavery, but to say actually trauma creates bitterness. Everything will be bitter because of the trauma. And now it's changed a world perspective, and now things have to adjust. And I talk about this because today is the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And it is the trauma that occurred. And 20 years have gone by, and 20 years is a generation. So now we look at it and we say, there is now a generation of removal from the traumatic event to where we stand in time now. And the importance of that is because a generation later, legacy begins to form. A generation later, you have young adults who didn't experience that. And all they're going to have to associate is what you tell them. And that's when we create legacy. And 20 years is actually that marker where we switch over to creating legacy. And we are at that moment where we can choose which legacy will shape around that day and that event. We watch the news, and I always imagine today watching the news, what if I were 18 years old? And I'm watching the news, and I'm watching all the troops pulling out of Afghanistan, and I'm hearing about something called a Taliban, and I'm watching the chaos and the panic and the terror and everything that's going on. But I have no memory of the beginning. I wasn't there for the beginning. I have no idea what they're doing there. I have no idea why they're there. And I have no idea why they've been there my entire life. That is no longer contextualized or framed. All they're watching is the troops leaving. And there's the disconnect between the legacy and what they're watching as a current event in their lives. They actually might not know what happened that caused what they're watching. We talk about 9/11 and how it changed our lives. We talk about everyone, no matter who you are, you know where you were when it happened. You know who told you. You know what you watched. It's as if it is burned into our consciousness and our memory. We can always place it. In an instant, the world changed. Security changed. Everything about how we approach travel, how we trust each other, how we trust a foreigner, how we trust someone who looks different. it all shifted. And it shifted so dramatically that when I tell my children, you used to be able to walk right onto a plane. You could get to the airport and just take your stuff and check in, boarding card, into the plane. Nobody would ask you if you had hand cream or scissors. There was nothing. And to them, it's unimaginable that the world could function that way. Everything changed overnight. And halachically, we were confronted with things as well. And we're still confronted with them. The World Trade Center, those buildings, those towers collapsed. Thousands of people are buried there. Does that make it a cemetery? What if you're a Cohen? Can you ever go? Can you ever pay tribute? Can you go to the memorial? Can you read the names? Can you stand in that place if it's a cemetery? Because Jewish law says you can't. Except, shouldn't everyone be able to go and take a moment of respect to honor victims and memory? We have a disconnect. We also know that in that moment, there were Orthodox Jews in those buildings who believed they would not make it out, and they did not. And so they called and left a message on their home phones divorcing their wives, because they knew if their bodies are not found, if they're burnt, their wives will enter a chained marriage and not be able to get out. Imagine the last message a partner hears on the phone from a loved one is a statement of divorce. It's a disconnect. Trauma brings out the disconnects. It'll show us where are the weak links. And then it's up to us. Do we address it, or do we simply put it aside, not address it, because it's going to show up again? That's what trauma does. We're supposed to pay attention to those things. We're supposed to look at that and say, oh, that needs addressing. That can't happen. We didn't. And so it processed again as trauma. And now we teach the trauma. That's what we teach. We teach the attack. We teach the violence. We teach the suspicion. Everything that connects to the day is trauma. And we are now creating a generation later of inherited trauma. It's what we're giving them about the day. It becomes the culture of it. It becomes the images. It's everything we say, all the memorials. It's all we talk about. Here's what we chose not to show, interestingly enough. We did not show moments of outstanding human kindness that we knew occurred on that day in that same moment. Ordinary people saved lives by doing extraordinary things they never thought they could do. They didn't process it. They just did it. Lives were saved. People found strength physically they didn't know they had to remove debris to save a stranger, to hear a quiet voice somewhere and go and respond. It's extraordinary. It's outstanding. Profound selflessness, heroic acts of strength and endurance to save a suffering stranger. But we didn't focus there. We watched a world come together to mourn and comfort each other, while everyone understood what a broken heart feels like. We all met there. But that's not the legacy that we've taught, and that's not the legacy we're passing down. In the moment, people were entering any house of worship they found, any. And we have pictures of churches filled with Jews, with a tallis on, with Muslims, with Christians. We have synagogues filled with Christians, with Muslims. We have mosques filled. It didn't matter. It was a moment where people stood together in faith, and all the boundaries came down. It's unique, it's incredibly strong, and somehow it's not being emphasized. So, as we talk about it, perhaps we want to start to broaden the conversation. It's 20 years. The next generation needs to hear a broader conversation. We need to tell them that thousands were murdered as we watched it happen in front of us. We saw and stood there and witnessed the worst of it. But in that same moment, we glimpsed the best of it. we were standing in a moment where both extremes expressed themselves in front of us. The media and the government are going to do what they need to do. Governments are supposed to keep their people safe. And in order to keep people safe, they're going to head to emphasize violence and fear and aggressive behavior, because you'll respond to that. We'll all respond to that. Of course we'll respond to that. It will keep us safe. There, the government fulfilled what it needs to do. We're all going to be looking around and making sure security is tight and keeping everybody safe. But it shouldn't end there, because this is what happens when it ends there. A generation grows up and doesn't understand how you celebrate. They don't understand, how do I take my joy public? What do I do? Because we shut down public joy. It's dangerous. You go to a concert, there could be a bomb. So people are afraid to go. So now we watched a generation celebrate by heading to violence. Your sports team wins, you take to the streets, you celebrate, and quickly it'll become violent. We've all watched it happen. Whether it's a World Cup or a this cup or a that cup, or I don't follow all the cups, but I've watched it happen in Europe, I've watched it happen in Los Angeles, I've watched it happen across the world. Groups of people celebrating. This is joy. Why are they rioting? Why are they starting fires? Why are they overturning cars? Why did it turn violence? Why are they actually hurting each other? And it didn't happen once or twice. It happens a lot. And now we're looking at a legacy we created for a young generation where we didn't model to them, this is how you celebrate. There are no ticker tape parades. We didn't show them how to do it. We showed them violence. We showed them aggression. And so they express that way. And we're watching a legacy, and we should take very close note about what we're watching, because part of it is rooting in how we framed 9/11. So when we look at it and we say, all right, so what are we supposed to do to pull all this together? Well, we look at the Jewish values and the model of leadership, because Judaism tells us that leadership and our values in these moments and every day must always be two voices speaking to each other. The voice of the experts above, the ones who study, the ones who are really immersed in it above, and the people who live the thing. The people who have day jobs, the people who can't sit there and study all the time, the ones who have to take the information and make it real, those two voices need to speak to each other. We cannot ever have one without the other. There's a wonderful example in the Talmud where one rabbi is saying to the other, and when you hear this example, you gotta love us that we even debate this, honestly. One rabbi is asking the other and saying, so if someone's choking, they ate meat and they're choking, and now they're going to grab water, or you're going to give them water because they're choking. Are they supposed to say a bracha on the water? Because they're not drinking the water to enjoy the water, they're drinking the water because they're choking. So of course we're going to sit there and go, honestly, I don't think anybody's going to think a bracha when they're handing water because they're choking. But there you hear the voice of the experts on top who are sitting there saying, well, what should we tell them to do? And the answer from the rabbis to the one who asked is, we're not going to rule on that. And the quote is, go observe what the people are doing. That rabbi is told, go to the marketplace and watch. Watch them eat. Watch what they're doing. Someone will be coughing, someone will be gagging, someone will hand them, just watch. Don't rule on it. Because whatever you rule is up here. We need to hear what's going on grassroots. How do we live the thing? And the two voices need to speak to each other. Always. Rabbis in Judaism are forbidden to enact Jewish laws that the people can't keep. It doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. It doesn't matter. It's two voices who are always speaking to each other. That now becomes what we can use in forming legacy. We look at it and we say, yes, we understood what the governments did. We got it. There's the voice top down. Where was the voice bottom up? Where was the dialogue of what we're supposed to shape together? The grassroots voice of value on this from Judaism says, first of all, value the righteousness in all people, because it can shine through, and it will shine through. Learn from trauma, don't live in it. Experience it, take what you need, and move out of it. If you sit in trauma, it will simply inherit to the next generation. Remember those who suffered so they can help us protect others. And most importantly, remember to learn to taste the sweet again, to understand how you celebrate, to understand how we express joy. We have to relearn that and reteach that to create that legacy. Today is an anniversary, and for many people, it's very painful. And for all of us, we know how the world changed. It's a difficult anniversary to process, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to shape the legacy. 20 years have gone by. A generation has gone by. And now is our moment to ask ourselves, what is the legacy that we carry forward from this day? What are the lessons? What is the shaping of it? What are the things that we deliberately want to pass on beyond the media, beyond the images, beyond the shock of it? Is another layer that's getting lost. And Jewishly, we're being told it can't get lost. Shabbat Shalom.